David Powers. Played by Keifer Sutherland, David Powers is the bleach blonde leader of the vampire gang in The Lost Boys, a movie that redefined what a vampire could be for the 1980s. Unlike older depictions of vampires who lived in castles and wore capes, David roamed the boardwalk of Santa Carla with a pack of rebellious teenagers. His style was all about leather jackets, earrings, motorcycles, and the dangerous charisma of youth. The film's tagline summed him up perfectly: sleep all day, party all night, never grow old, never die, it's fun to be a vampire. This shift turned the vampire into a cultural icon for the MTV generation, connecting the monster with the thrill of rebellion and peer pressure. David's way of speaking and moving gave him an unsettling edge. He did not rely on long speeches, but on repetition, posture, and sharp glances. His constant whisper of Michael throughout the film was hypnotic, almost like a chant, pulling Jason Patric's character into his orbit. Director Joel Schumacher gave Keifer Sutherland the least amount of dialogue of the main cast, but that choice highlighted his presence even more. The performance suggested power without needing to explain it, and every smirk or stare felt like a challenge. The homoerotic undertones of his relationship with Michael added another layer, framing David not just as a monster but as a figure of seduction. Visually, David's look came from accident and rebellion. Schumacher originally wanted him to have long white hair for a timeless effect, but Sutherland hated it. Inspired by musician Billy Idol, he cut his hair into the spiky mullet that became the character's trademark. The gloves he wore were not fashion but necessity, hiding a wrist cast from a dirt bike accident. In one striking moment, when sunlight burns his hand, a single tear rolls down his cheek. Audiences read it as vulnerability, but it was actually caused by the painful plastic contact lenses that dried out his eyes. The film's most memorable scenes show David as both terrifying and cool. He tricks Michael into drinking vampire blood from a bottle disguised as wine. He hovers mid-air outside a house window, daring Michael to give in. And in the climax, he fights in the vampire lair, ending with him impaled on antlers in one of horror's most iconic deaths. Keifer Sutherland later said, "The Lost Boys was one of the proudest points of his career, as the film found new fans across generations and made David Powers the eternal punk rock vampire." The vampire Lestat. Lestat de Liancourt, in Interview with the Vampire, is loud, selfish, and impossible to ignore. Played by Tom Cruise, he is not the quiet, shadowy predator that audiences had grown used to. Instead, he is the brat prince of vampires, a figure who laughs, taunts, and treats immortality as a stage for his own performance. His powers are great, but what makes him stand out is his attitude. Lestat enjoys being a vampire. He hunts with flair, tortures his victims with glee, and dances with plague-ridden corpses as if it were a party. He is cruel but never boring, always moving with the energy of someone who knows he can outlive everyone around him. Underneath the cruelty, Lestat is terrified of loneliness. When he turns Louis de Pointe-de-Lac, played by Brad Pitt, it is less about companionship for Louis and more about his own desperate need to not be alone. Louis quickly sees through him, saying, "It's you who need me." Lestat even goes further, creating Claudia, a child vampire, just to stop Louis from leaving him. The small family unit they form is unstable, locked in hatred but also bound together forever. This tension drives the story, showing that Lestat's greatest weakness is not sunlight or fire, but his fear of abandonment. The movie was controversial before it even began filming. Author Anne Rice, who created Lestat, hated the casting choice of Tom Cruise. She said he looked nothing like her vision of the tall, blonde aristocrat. She publicly criticized him and even suggested that he and Brad Pitt should switch roles. Cruise admitted her harsh words hurt deeply. But when the film was finished, Rice changed her mind completely. After watching an early copy, she praised Cruise's Lestat as unforgettable and even bought a 2-page ad in Variety to apologize and celebrate his performance.
I was blown away. I think he really did a magnificent job.
The process of becoming Lestat was physically draining. Cruise read through the entire series of novels to understand the character's full history. To create the vampire look, makeup artists painted blue veins onto his skin and required him to hang upside down for half an hour so they could trace his real veins. The contact lenses were sharp and painful, and the fangs had to be remade multiple times because they kept breaking. Shooting mostly at night made the cast miserable, especially Brad Pitt, who asked to be released from his contract and was told it would cost him $40 million. On screen, the tension between Cruise and Pitt made their relationship feel real. Lestat is energetic and flamboyant, while Louis is miserable and brooding. The imbalance mirrored the reality of the production, with Cruise already a superstar and Pitt still rising. One of the film's most iconic moments comes when Lestat tells Louis, "Don't be afraid. I'm going to give you the choice I never had." That line captures the contradiction of the character. He is offering power, but also binding Louis to him forever. By the end, Cruise's performance redefined vampires for the 1990s, making Lestat both a monster and a strange kind of rock star.
Sorry for stopping your video, but you really should subscribe.
Bela Lugosi's Count Dracula. Bela Lugosi's Count Dracula is the role that set the standard for nearly every vampire that came after him. Before Lugosi, the most famous vampire on screen was Max Schreck's grotesque Count Orlok in Nosferatu. Lugosi changed the image completely by making the vampire elegant, aristocratic, and hypnotic rather than monstrous. His dark tuxedo, flowing cape, and piercing stare became the universal look of Dracula for decades. Even the way he spoke, slowly, with careful pauses and a thick Hungarian accent, added a sense of mystery and menace that audiences had never seen before. His famous line,
"I never drink. Why?"
became one of the most quoted in horror history. Lugosi had been playing Dracula on stage long before Universal Pictures brought the story to the screen. He performed the role hundreds of times on Broadway and during touring productions, which gave him precise control over every gesture and line. That background explains why his acting style feels theatrical, with big movements and dramatic pauses. At the time, Hollywood was still transitioning from silent films to sound, and many actors struggled with dialogue. Lugosi's careful delivery made him stand out as both strange and captivating. Getting the part was not simple. Universal originally wanted Lon Chaney, known as the Man of a Thousand Faces, but he died before filming began. The studio did not trust Lugosi, fearing he was too foreign to attract audiences. Lugosi fought for the role, even accepting only $3,500 for 7 weeks of work, far less than his co-stars. The risk paid off. When Dracula premiered, it was a box office hit and launched the Universal Monsters era. On set, the production was often chaotic. Director Todd Browning was uncomfortable with sound filmmaking, and cinematographer Karl Freund ended up shaping much of the movie's eerie look with shadow-heavy lighting influenced by German Expressionism. Universal even shot a Spanish-language version at night on the same sets, which many historians consider more visually creative. Lugosi, however, gave the English version its unforgettable centerpiece through his performance. The success of Dracula made Lugosi a star, but it also trapped him. His heavy accent and strong association with the Count meant he was typecast almost exclusively as villains and monsters. Though he gave memorable performances in White Zombie and as Igor in Son of Frankenstein, he never escaped Dracula's shadow. When Lugosi died in 1956, his family chose to bury him in his Dracula costume. He had once said, "Dracula never ends. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse." That duality defined his career, but it also guaranteed that his version of the Count would live forever as the face of the cinematic vampire. Blade. Blade is not a tragic nobleman or a seductive predator, he is a warrior built for battle. Played by Wesley Snipes, Blade is a half-human, half-vampire hybrid known as the Daywalker. He has all of the strengths of vampires, such as superhuman speed, strength, and healing, but he can also walk in daylight. His only weakness is the constant thirst for blood, which he controls with a special serum. This unique balance makes him an outcast in both worlds, not fully human, not fully vampire, and that tension drives his story. Unlike most vampires in cinema, Blade uses his powers not for feeding but to hunt those who prey on humanity. The character's origins in the comics were very different. In 1973, Blade was created as a human immune to vampire bites. He fought with wooden knives and toughness rather than supernatural gifts. For the film, writer David Goyer and Snipes transformed him into a martial arts master with vampire powers. This change not only modernized the character but also made him visually and physically dynamic for a late 1990s audience. The film tied vampirism to disease, drawing parallels with the HIV and AIDS epidemic of the time, giving the story a layer of social commentary beyond simple action. Wesley Snipes' real-life martial arts expertise shaped Blade's physical style. Snipes had trained since he was 12 and earned high ranks in Shotokan, karate, and hapkido. He also studied capoeira, kung fu, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. His skills were so sharp that while filming Demolition Man, the cameras could not keep up with the speed of his movements, and he had to slow down. For Blade, Snipes designed many of the fight scenes himself and performed them in full costume to keep the action authentic. His sword work, flips, and kicks gave the fights an intensity that separated Blade from other comic book heroes of the era. The movie's most famous sequence is the Blood Rave opening, where vampires gather at an underground club as sprinklers rain down blood to pounding techno music. Blade storms in and slaughters dozens of them with his katana and silver weapons, instantly defining his character as ruthless and unstoppable. His deadpan one-liner,
"Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill,"
became an enduring piece of action movie dialogue. Behind the scenes, the studio doubted the project. Some executives even suggested changing Blade to a white character, which Goyer and Snipes refused. The original ending involved a giant tornado made of blood but was cut after poor test screenings, replaced by the sword fight with Deacon Frost. Despite these issues, Blade earned over $131 million worldwide and proved there was an audience for darker, rated comic book movies. Without Blade, films like X-Men and Spider-Man might never have been made. By combining martial arts mastery with a grim hero's burden, Wesley Snipes turned Blade into the first modern superhero success story and the unlikely spark that led to the Marvel boom. Gary Oldman's Count Dracula. Gary Oldman's portrayal of Count Dracula in Francis Ford Coppola's film is layered and theatrical. Instead of playing him as just a monster, Oldman presents Dracula as a tragic warlord who lost his soul after the death of his wife. In the story, he was once Vlad the Impaler, a knight who fought for God. When he discovered his beloved Elizabeta had died, he cursed God and transformed into a vampire. This origin gives his curse a reason rooted in grief and rage, making him less of an evil figure and more of a man destroyed by sorrow. His famous line,
I have crossed oceans of time to find you,
captures that idea of eternal love driving eternal damnation. Oldman performs Dracula in several striking forms, each one unique. As the ancient count in his castle, he wears a tall hairstyle and speaks in a whispering growl, appearing old and strange. When he comes to London, he takes on the image of a younger, elegant nobleman, charming Mina Harker with his sophistication. At other times, he turns into bestial shapes, like a wolf or a monstrous Batman, showing his raw, animal power. These transformations let Oldman show different sides of the character: sorrowful lover, cultured gentleman, and terrifying beast, all wrapped in one role. To prepare, Oldman went deep into method acting. He often kept himself isolated from the rest of the cast, choosing to sleep in a coffin during production to stay in character. He even trained with a singing coach for 2 months to lower his voice by a full octave so the sound would feel ancient and haunting. The makeup process was intense, often taking over 4 hours each day, and he shaved back his own hairline so prosthetics could be applied. Coppola rewarded his dedication by later gifting him a coffin, which Oldman actually kept. The film's style gave Oldman's performance the perfect stage. Coppola banned digital effects and instead used old camera tricks like reverse motion, layered exposures, and shadows that moved independently from the body. The costumes designed by Eiko Ishioka were bold and symbolic, such as the blood-red armor that looked like muscles and the golden robe, inspired by Gustav Klimt's painting The Kiss. Oldman's acting fit this dreamlike world, with his operatic tone and physical presence matching the heightened visuals. One of the most memorable moments is Dracula's first meeting with Mina in London, when he appears not as a monster but as a charming man who immediately captivates her. Another unforgettable scene is his monstrous wolf-like attack, showing his rage unleashed. The combination of romance and horror made this version stand out. The film earned over $215 million worldwide and won 3 Academy Awards, but its legacy is carried by Oldman's performance. By mixing tragedy, terror, and passion, he gave audiences a Dracula who was not just a villain but also a heartbroken lover cursed to walk forever in darkness. Jerry Dandrige. Jerry Dandrige in Fright Night was a vampire for the suburbs. Unlike earlier portrayals that placed vampires in castles or gothic ruins, Chris Sarandon played him as the neighbor next door, charming, stylish, and dangerously convincing. His smooth appearance, complete with fashionable 1980s clothes and an easy smile, made him seem safe, even likable. This was his greatest weapon. People let down their guard around him, never suspecting the monster beneath the surface. His line,
"Welcome to Fright Night. For real,"
revealed the cold predator hidden beneath the charm. Sarandon and director Tom Holland worked together to give Jerry depth. Instead of playing him as a one-note villain, Sarandon suggested that Jerry's obsession with Charlie's girlfriend Amy came from her resemblance to a lost love. This detail gave his character sadness and longing that made him more than a simple killer. Sarandon also decided Jerry should constantly eat apples. He connected this choice to fruit bats, which gave Jerry's actions a natural but unsettling edge, making him seem slightly animalistic. Jerry's loneliness is also revealed in his interaction with Evil Ed, Charlie's outcast friend. Instead of attacking him outright, Jerry appeals to Ed's pain as a bullied outsider. He promises him power and acceptance, offering a bond built on companionship. This moment shows Jerry's need for connection, even if it comes in twisted and destructive ways. The idea that a vampire could be both a predator and a lonely figure added emotional weight to the character. The special effects in Fright Night amplified Sarandon's performance. With a budget of $1 million dedicated just to effects, the film delivered some of the most memorable vampire transformations of the 1980s. Jerry's monstrous bat form, Amy's terrifying shark mouth, and Evil Ed's painful wolf transformation were created using puppetry, prosthetics, and long hours of makeup. Sarandon endured heavy prosthetics and painful contact lenses to complete Jerry's transformations, which made the monster inside him feel more real. One of the film's most iconic moments is Jerry cornering Charlie in his bedroom, casually charming Charlie's mother while issuing veiled threats. Another is his reveal in full vampire form, with glowing eyes and fangs bared, finally exposing the horror beneath the neighborly disguise. Fright Night was a success at the box office and became a cult classic. Jerry Dandrige stood out as a perfect mix of modern charm and ancient evil, reminding audiences that danger can hide behind even the friendliest smile. Santánico Pandemonium. Santánico Pandemonium appears midway through From Dusk Till Dawn and completely changes the film's direction. Played by Salma Hayek, she is introduced as the star dancer of the Titty Twister, a rough Mexican strip club. Her hypnotic performance on stage, with a python draped across her body, holds every patron in silence. She embodies desire and danger at once, controlling the room without speaking a word. Just as the audience settles into the crime thriller story, her transformation rips it apart. She becomes a monstrous vampire queen, revealing that the entire bar is run by bloodsuckers. This single reveal shifts the movie into a chaotic vampire siege, making her the pivot point of the story. Hayek faced a serious challenge in performing the dance. She had a lifelong fear of snakes, and the script she received never mentioned that she would have to dance with one. Director Robert Rodriguez and writer Quentin Tarantino only told her on the day of shooting. To overcome her phobia, Hayek studied the cultural meaning of snakes and reframed the dance as a ritual of inner strength. She even entered a trance-like state to perform, later admitting she had little memory of filming. The snake she handled was real, and her ability to perform through that fear gave the scene its raw, unforgettable energy. Her transformation into a serpent-like creature was achieved with prosthetics, makeup, and practical effects, rather than computer graphics. The sudden switch from alluring human to monstrous predator is what cemented the shock value. She goes from dancing goddess to demonic leader, snarling and attacking the Gecko brothers and the other patrons. Though her screen time is brief, the contrast between the beauty of her dance and the horror of her true form made Santánico one of the most memorable vampires of the 1990s. The role brought Hayek instant recognition, but it also led to typecasting. Hollywood often saw her only as a sexy figure after From Dusk Till Dawn, which limited her opportunities in comedy and drama for years. Still, Santánico remained iconic. Her character was later expanded in sequels and a television series, but Hayek's original performance remained the most powerful version. The moment she delivers the line,
"Welcome to slavery,"
just before the bloody chaos erupts, captured her as both ruler and monster. In only a few minutes of screen time, Salma Hayek created a vampire queen who defined the movie and etched her name into horror history. Count Orlok. Bill Skarsgård's Count Orlok in Robert Eggers' Nosferatu is a deliberate return to the vampire's roots as a grotesque, corpse-like figure. Instead of playing him as an aristocrat or a tragic romantic, Skarsgård embodies Orlok as a dead Transylvanian nobleman clinging to fated dignity. His skin is rotting, his frame skeletal, and even the back of his head shows exposed bone and tissue. He hides this decay under fur-lined robes and a nobleman's hat, as if trying to keep the illusion of humanity. Unlike the slick charm of modern vampires, Orlok is foul and unnerving, a being closer to plague than passion. His presence in Wisborg, the German port town where the story unfolds, is tied to rats, disease, and fear itself. Designing the character required months of work. The makeup team applied more than 60 prosthetic pieces to Skarsgård's body each day, covering him from head to toe. He initially worried he would not be able to perform through the heavy layers, but once he tested the look on camera, he felt the character take shape. A detail that set this version apart was the addition of a thick mustache, common among Transylvanian men of the time. It also served a purpose in the design by partially hiding his sharp rat-like teeth, making the reveal of his mouth even more frightening. Skarsgård also transformed his voice for the role. Rather than rely on digital effects, he trained with an Icelandic opera singer to lower his voice naturally by a full octave. His routine included throat singing, larynx massage, and daily exercises to create a deep, booming tone. Much of Orlok's early presence in the film is heard before it is seen, with his voice echoing in the dark.
Leave there your conveniences.
This made the vocal transformation as important as the makeup. To heighten the otherworldly effect, Skarsgård kept himself separate from the rest of the cast during filming, so his appearances always felt alien and intimidating. Director Robert Eggers designed Nosferatu with historical authenticity and Gothic atmosphere. Sets of 19th-century Wisborg were built in Prague with sagging rooftops and crooked alleys. The film used 2,000 live rats to create the sense of plague. Cinematographer Jaron Blaschke shot with vintage lenses on color film to give the visuals a painterly quality influenced by romantic art. The choice to ground everything in period detail made Orlok feel like a real horror stepping out of folklore. One of Orlok's defining moments is when he silently looms over Ellen Hutter's bed, his long nails extended as shadows stretch across the wall. Another chilling scene comes when he emerges from his coffin surrounded by rats, his hollow eyes fixed on his prey. Skarsgård described the role as conjuring pure evil, saying it took him time to shake the character off after filming. By embodying the vampire as an unstoppable plague, he created a monster far removed from romantic depictions, restoring the vampire to its original role as a true figure of terror. Prince Mamuwalde. Prince Mamuwalde in Blacula is one of the most tragic vampires ever shown on screen. Played by William Marshall, he begins as an African prince in the 1700s who travels to Transylvania to ask Count Dracula for help ending the slave trade. Instead of receiving support, he is mocked, attacked, and cursed with vampirism. Dracula locks him in a coffin and cruelly names him Blacula. His wife Luva dies just outside his sealed tomb, leaving him to awaken centuries later in Los Angeles, filled with grief and rage. This origin ties his suffering directly to slavery and racism, giving his story weight beyond simple horror. Marshall's performance gave the film its dignity. Standing 6 feet 5 inches tall with a commanding voice, he brought the authority of a Shakespearean actor to what could have been a campy role. He insisted on rewriting the script to give Mamuwalde a proper backstory, refusing to let him be a caricature. As a result, the character became more than a monster. He was a nobleman, robbed of his name and humanity, carrying both love and sorrow into his cursed existence. When Mamuwalde meets Tina, who looks like his lost wife, his main goal becomes reuniting with her, not conquest. This longing makes him sympathetic, even while he feeds. The film uses his vampirism as an allegory for racial oppression. In the modern setting, Mamuwalde rejects the name Blacula, calling it a slave name forced on him by Dracula. He asserts his identity, introducing himself by his birth name. This element resonated with the Black Power movement of the 1970s. Even small moments, like police dismissing the deaths of black victims, highlighted real social issues. At the same time, the movie reflects some dated stereotypes, but Marshall's gravity kept Mamuwalde from being reduced to parody. The production itself reflected both low-budget creativity and cultural importance. Released during the height of blaxploitation cinema, the film was marketed as a pulp horror but stood out because of Marshall's seriousness. He made lines like, "You shall pay, Dracula. You shall pay for your arrogance." Feel regal rather than campy. Behind the scenes, his influence ensured the character was written with dignity, something rare for black horror characters at the time. One of the most striking scenes is when Mamuwalde mourns over Tina's body, torn between his thirst and his love. Another powerful moment is his decision at the end to walk into the sunlight, choosing death over continuing as a monster without her. Blacula became one of the top-grossing films of 1972 and won the Saturn Award for Best Horror Film. Though it sparked sequels and imitators, it is William Marshall's performance that remains timeless, making Mamuwalde a cornerstone of black horror and one of the genre's most layered vampires. Eli in Let the Right One In is a vampire trapped in the body of a 12-year-old child. Played by Lina Leandersson, Eli lives in a bleak Swedish housing estate and survives on blood provided by her aging human caretaker, Håkan. She tells her new friend Oscar, "I've been 12 for a very long time." That line defines her existence. She is ancient but frozen in childhood, unable to grow up, unable to escape the cycle of feeding and hiding. The film removes glamour from vampirism, showing it instead as a life of endless loneliness and survival. Leandersson's performance makes Eli haunting and sympathetic at the same time. She barely moves when she speaks, creating a stillness that feels older than her appearance. When Oscar hugs her, she does not know how to react, showing how starved she is for real affection. This emotional emptiness makes her friendship with Oscar feel both tender and unsettling. Eli's reliance on Håkan, who kills for her, also adds tragedy. He is not a loyal servant like in older vampire stories, but a tired, broken man whose devotion hints at a disturbing kind of love. The filmmakers made choices that deepened Eli's strangeness. Although Leandersson played the role, her voice was dubbed in post-production by another actor to create a more androgynous, eerie sound. This made Eli feel less like a child and more like an old soul. A fleeting shot also shows scars on her body, hinting at a dark past that the film leaves unexplained. In the original novel, Eli is revealed to have been a boy castrated long ago when turned into a vampire, but the film presents this detail only indirectly. That ambiguity makes the character harder to define, emphasizing her otherness. One of the most chilling scenes comes when Oscar tests what happens if he does not invite Eli into his home. She enters anyway, and her body begins to bleed from her eyes, ears, and skin until he finally welcomes her. This interpretation of vampire folklore turns the old invitation rule into a metaphor for emotional trust and vulnerability. Another unforgettable moment is Eli's silent massacre of the bullies who torment Oscar, a burst of violence that reveals her power while still protecting the boy she cares for. The film's slow pace and muted colors match Eli's quiet existence. Critics praised it as one of the most original vampire stories in decades because it focused less on horror spectacle and more on the pains of childhood and isolation. Lina Leandersson, only 13 when cast, had no major acting experience before this role, yet her controlled performance carried the film. Eli's mix of innocence, cruelty, and longing made her one of cinema's most memorable modern vampires. If you enjoyed this deep dive video about these characters and the actors who played them, you're gonna love the one on the screen, so go check it out now.